All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome. And today we're going to go over making your content accessible. I'm Linda Sudlesky. It looks like a few of you have been in the other sessions as well, so you know who I am. And I'm an instructional designer at UMass Boston, and I also co-teach a summer course. And before we begin, I just want to mention that I'll be alternating the terminology of disabled person and person with a disability, because I understand that different people have different preferences when it comes to the language they use to refer to their disability. And it's a good idea to always check with the person about their language preferences. So today we're going to have a whole laundry list of things to cover. So we'll get through as many as we can. We're going to cover an overview of accessibility and the 3 principles of universal design for learning. And then we will delve into document accessibility, where we'll cover what it means to use headings, lists, descriptive hyperlinks, how to use tables properly, and alt text. And I threw in some contrast information in there as well, and then a brief overview of multimedia accessibility using captions and transcripts. But we're very lucky because we have Rizarda Agimi here, and she is our video expert on our team. So any additional questions that come in, I'm sure she'll be able to help answer. So just as a reminder, accessibility is that a person with a disability is afforded the opportunity to acquire the same information, engage in the same interactions, and enjoy the same services as a person with a disability in an equally effective, equally integrated manner with substantially equivalent ease of use. That's quite a mouthful, but it says a lot and means a lot to a lot of people. And I know you know that because you're here, so that's wonderful. And now that we know what disability is, I just want to review something we did go over yesterday. And I know this is going to be a little bit of a repeat for those of you who were here yesterday, but just a reminder of how people are impacted by various disabilities. It's just really important to consider that many disabled people experience more than one of these impacts for any given disability that they may be experiencing or have. And think of how much your brain does for your body. And if it's not operating at 100%, then it could impact any one of these things. Vision, if for someone who is blind and has a visual impairment, they may use a screen reader to access materials. Color blindness is also an important factor, because we have to make sure that the text in the background we're putting text on contrasts well so that people can read it and understand it. And one of my biggest lately examples of that is the Apple information. How you see a lot of descriptors and support information for documentation in gray text on white background, and it's like, how can I read that? So hearing, if someone is deaf or hard of hearing, or perhaps English is a second language, they will need to use a captioning service or the auto captioning that you're offering with the tool that you're using. So it's going to be important to make sure that that captioning is accurate. Movement, if someone is mobility impaired, it may be important to have appropriate seating, as well as for digital environments, keeping in mind that disabled persons whose primary disability impacts their mobility, they may navigate your information using only a keyboard or other assistive technology that just uses a keyboard. So keep that in mind, because I know we're big into drag and drop and clicking and all that stuff. Just make sure you're thinking about how everyone might be navigating your materials. Thinking, remembering, and learning disabilities are important to keep in mind as well, to use simple language, alternative descriptions and visuals. And some people struggle with communicating. They benefit from alternative ways of participating in an activity. And lastly, mental health. People with mental health disabilities may need more absences, flexible deadlines, alternative testing, frequent breaks. And not lastly, I'm sorry, so social relationships also, it's important to consider when you're disseminating materials, how someone prefers to communicate. So I want to just touch upon universal design for learning. I don't know if you're familiar with CAST, an organization that disseminates guidelines for universal design, and those guidelines focus on engagement, representation, and action and expression when you're compiling any information, whether it's instructional or informative. So more specifically, CAST asks us to provide multiple means of engagement. And the general thought behind that is that learners differ markedly in the ways they engage and motivate to learn. And ultimately, if we're making information for someone, whether we're a teacher or not, it's an informative piece of information, and your audience perhaps is learning information that you're trying to disseminate. So keep that in mind. And this tells me to vary the information I'm putting out to my audience and engage them in different ways. The next principle is multiple means of representation. And it's because people differ in the ways they perceive and comprehend information that's presented to them. And providing multiple means of that, of representing the materials, for example, using captioning and transcripts for video is important. So your audience, whether students, staff, or faculty, can engage with the materials in the manner that works best for them at the time they're trying to use them. And then finally, multiple means of action and expression. So if you're an activity planner for the university, it might mean varying the types of events you're planning. For educators, it could mean varying the types of deliverables in your course, from discussions, group projects, individual papers, etc. And considering that the expectations that you have for others in participating in your event or activity or learning are flexible, and expectations are flexible as well. So that said, I used this image in yesterday's presentation and just wanted to quickly look at it again, because if you were at yesterday's presentation, I basically went over a process that I undertook to wrap my head around making personas for people with disabilities. And where I listed all the potential developmental considerations and potential design considerations across the top. And what I represented here was basically just the potential for benefit. And this isn't officially gathered research or anything like that, but we know, for example, if you just look at all of the white cells, that someone who is blind is not going to directly benefit from captions. And someone who is deaf is not going to directly benefit from narration, but everybody else is going to. And so I separated the levels of benefit from needed design elements for people. And that's in dark blue, and light blue design element benefits people and then doesn't benefit. And so there are very few cells that don't have any color at all and that don't benefit. So it's important to keep that in mind. as we're going through some of the elements that we're going to talk about today. The first of which I would like to talk about is using headings. Now, please tell me in chat, because I did not prepare polls ahead of time, I apologize. But please tell me in chat, are you working on any particular documents? Like, what kind of documents do you work on most? So we have an idea of, is it a syllabus? Is it an outline for a paper? Is it, you know, just general informative documentation? How do you organize it? Do you make text bold so that you're just differentiating between different sections? That's wonderful for those of us who are sighted. But for people using screen readers, using built-in headings is what will really differentiate that information and help them to navigate your document. So if you're not using headings, a person using a screen reader has to perhaps go through your entire 5-page document before finding the piece of information they're looking for. Because while we have the benefits of our eyes to visually scan a page, they're scanning the page using these markers that the markup tags that are in headings. And so this GIF that you see right here is showing us how you basically highlight your title text, make it a heading 1. Highlight your first subtitle, make it a heading 2. And go on and continue to build your document as if you're going along with an outline, perhaps that you prepared in advance. Does anyone have any questions? Are there any questions or types of documents in chat that people have put in that are Rizarda? No? Okay. So moving on. Using lists. It's going to be important also that you're using the bullet button in Word to generate your lists. So when you have lists of things, just highlighting that list, using bullets or a numbered list makes that more, it marks it up as well for the screen reader user and makes it more accessible for people using screen readers. So, so that you don't need to be like manually putting 1 dot space 2 dot space and make your list. You just type up your list, and as you can see, use the tools that are in Word to mark that up so that it's easily identifiable for someone using a screen reader as a list. So describing hyperlinks. So links or URLs should tell the user exactly where to go if they click on them. They should make sense when taken out of context of the surrounding text. And if a link isn't descriptive, it won't be clear, or it'll be difficult to read where the link might lead the person to. And I say this because people who use screen readers, again, I'm going to the screen reader, navigate links differently than we do. They will either tab through links or bring up a link list. So they're viewing this information completely out of context. So any statement that we have before we type click here is not useful to that person navigating in that way. And that's why we don't recommend using the ambiguous example that I have on the slide there, click here. And another thing we don't recommend is using the long URL, because imagine someone going through a screen reader trying to make sense of what's in that URL that tells me where this goes. It's not helpful. And it's not helpful to those of us sighted individuals as well. So the descriptive version of the same link that I put in this example would be WebAIM Introduction to Links and Hypertext. Very, very simple. You would just type in the text and highlight it, and then go to insert and then choose link, and then paste in your URL. It's very easy. There is a I encourage you to look at that WebAIM page on links and hypertext, and I have all of the links that I will send to you after the session is over. Using tables properly is also very important. If your information will best fit the format of a table and it's the only way you can disseminate that information, yes, use a table. But it's best to keep that simple if you do have to use a table. If you can put your information in list format or inline format, that's much better. And there's ways to make it look really nice and do that. Because I know most people visually prefer a table because it's so easy to just separate all of the information with the columns and all of that. So this example here shows you how to make a header row for your table. So what that does is that enables a person using a screen reader to have the header of each column identified each time they're going through a cell. So they will know it's header 1 or it's whatever the title is. And I have the URL for our website that shows you this information and has it written up in detail, and I will give that to you as well, or Rosarda can give that to you, the learning design at umb.edu/learning design accessibility page. Has all of that information for you. Just an example, so that inclusive design considerations thing that I showed you before, the original version was this. And so this is more complex because what I did was I separated cells, I split cells, and I combined cells. And visually it looked wonderful, but for someone using a screen reader, that would be a nightmare. Because they would go from the first cell to, oops, sorry, I clicked on something and I shouldn't have. The first cell to hopefully that second cell, but the navigation would not be as clean and easy, and the header row would not be as defined with this example as it is with this example. So that's a good example I felt of keeping it simple and not getting too fancy with your split cells and all kinds of stuff when you're making tables. Does anyone have any questions about tables? So adding a document title, Word has built-in fields for metadata that facilitates navigation of documents. And especially when they are converted to PDF and accessed through a browser. So make sure you populate the document's properties with the title, author information, additional information as applicable. And this shows you how to do that. I will wait till it plays again. So go up to File, Properties, Summary, and then just enter the title information and click OK. But a lot of times when you use an accessibility checker, you will, that will be something that comes up if you're not putting a title in your document. So in order to pass that accessibility check as well as provide that level of accessibility for people, it's very good to add your document title. So I also threw in contrast and color blindness because what may seem like contrast to one person may not contrast at all to another. 8% of men and 0.5% of women have color blindness. So then why use color, right? Well, here's one non-example of how to use color. And this was from 2015. It was NFL, I don't know if you guys follow the NFL or not, but they debuted these color rush uniforms. And what they didn't realize was that the 8% of men who are colorblind depend upon the variance in the uniforms to know which player was on which team. So instead, many with red-green colorblindness saw that everyone looked the same, as you could see in this image on the left. And they were like going mad trying to watch football, not sure who's on what team. And completely, everybody complained to the NFL, and they had experts ensure that the uniforms, although color rush, would be distinguishable for all people. So it's a good example of how color can be overlooked, even in the highest of places. So a contrast example, I have here text that has good contrast, text that has bad contrast. And the reason I chose these colors is because a lot of people think that contrast just means you can't use red and green. And it doesn't. It's not as much about color, it's about the luminosity of the color against another color. And that people could see the difference between those two colors, regardless of how their cones are functioning in their eyes, and regardless of how they might see color. Because really, technically, we all see differently. We all function differently. So we have to count on that in the way we're designing things and how we're using color. So this is what these colors look like, the colors that aren't good contrast in the WebAIM contrast checker. I put them in there, and they basically said, no, this fails everything. And the ideal contrast, or the best contrast you should have, is 4.5 to 1, I believe. Unless you're using super large text, then you can get away with like 3 to 1. But WebAIM has this contrast checker as well as other contrast checkers that are available. Everybody has different preferences. WebAIM is my favorite one. So I'm going to share another example. There's a very, very light green against a bright red. And to me, that looks like that would contrast, right? But it fails in most cases, because it's saying it's only 4.12 to 1. So you could go into a contrast checker and find the colors that you want to use first, and then you could click on, oops, I did it again. Sorry about that. I clicked on the, you just click on the, or double click on the hex code that defines what the color is. And then you can put that in whatever you're working on, your text color, your design. And does anybody have any questions about contrast? No?
Linda, there's a question from Kelly, if you'd like to
Sure.
expand on. It's about, I believe it's about the function to that you were talking about, to add the title to a document. Does that only exist in Word or across other products? And I believe in my testing that it exists in other products as well, right?
Yes, and it in Adobe Acrobat, as well as I believe InDesign. I think even PowerPoint, right? You can add the type. Yeah, so I'll in most of these document creation products that we have and that we use on a regular basis, yes, you have the ability to put a title, and it's usually in that same place, going to properties of the document and adding the information in. Thank you for the question. So just some contrast guidance and resources. Your contrast ratio should be between 4.5 to 1, 3 to 1 for larger text, as I had said. The text images or images of text that are part of an inactive user interface component, that are pure decoration, that are not visible to anyone, or that part of a picture and contain significant other visual content, have no contrast requirements. So like there are incidental images that, you know, if it doesn't have meaning, it's okay. Like, for example, if you do an embossment kind of thing, the white, you know, your white background with a light gray embossment or something like that. As long as the text above it contrasts with that embossment, that's okay. The fact that, you know, the white against the light color. Text that is part of a logo or brand name really has no contrast requirement. I would think it would. I think that was from our website, Rez. But we'll look that up and check on that. But these are the three resources I use the most: the WebAIM contrast and color accessibility page, WebAIM contrast checker, and Pilestone colorblind simulator. And I could, if you want, I could show you those now. Or I could do that after the rest of the presentation. I think I'll wait until after the rest. So alt text and image description. So for long descriptions, for images that are used for images that can convey complex information, like an infographic or a chart or some kind of data visualization that you add in your information, that it's important that people know what it means and what it conveys. I am going to pause this show. For alt text, you would use for simple images, and the best practice is to describe them with alternative text or alt text captions. It's easy and efficient application that is employed in most authoring tools. So you can use the auto captioning, and I'm going to go over to reshare my screen. Apologize. Wait. So I put some images in here, and I can, in here meaning in a Word document. I can right click on this image and insert caption if I wanted to, and label the image. So I could say, Figure 1 blueberries, or just but then I also want to go to the alt text. So if this image was purely decorative and it had nothing to do with the information I was disseminating, and I just like the way blueberries look because I like the color blue, right? I can mark this as decorative. And everybody is seeing my screen, yes? Okay, good. Because I don't see the green thing around it, so I got a little scared. So I can mark it as decorative, or I can accept the auto alt text, which is macro image shot of blueberries. Not bad. I could say, I could add information to that with drops of water on them. A simple image, not a lot needed for that. So I can go to the next image and leave this alt text open. And the first thing it comes up with is red striped umbrellas. So maybe I would add to that red striped umbrellas at the beach in front of the blue waters, the blue ocean waters, because I'm descriptive. So I could say how many red striped umbrellas there are if I wanted to, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows of red striped umbrellas, 5 umbrellas or 6 umbrellas deep. So I can add more information depending on the importance of knowing how many umbrellas are in that image and what you're using the image for. Does anybody want to take a shot at how they would describe this one? Is this description good enough, what they gave me? Golf ball on a tee in a green fairway? Would you add more or would you leave it? You could unmute if you want, if anybody wants to contribute. Well, I personally would say on a green fairway, and it looks like with water in the distance and a blue sky. So I would add that to my description, to my alt text. Fresh carrots laid on a wooden floor. That's not bad, right? Pumpkin pie. So I mean, like, you can use the auto text. Sometimes it's really good. Sometimes for more complicated images, it's not as good. Does anyone have any questions about providing alt text?
Yeah, I'm wondering if you could, provide some suggestions on how we would describe more complex information. For example, if there's an image of a chart or a graph with, information going on different directions, how would you summarize that, and how detailed does it need to be?
I would say for a chart or a graph, it's important to be detailed. It's important that the viewer knows what it is you're depicting in your chart and graph. So you could be specific about the x-axis and the y-axis, what's on them specifically, and what each item, like how each item performed, what percentage they are received, or how many, it depends on what you're measuring, if it's percentages, if it's points, if it's number of people, being specific as to what it conveys. And a lot of people get concerned about that, especially in instructional environments, because sometimes instructors will put a data viz information in there, or a picture in their chart, because they want the task is, hey, figure out what does this mean. So if you get really, really descriptive, it's like you're giving the answer away. But you have to think of the alternative, which is there could be a select bunch of people who aren't getting the information at all. And it's more important that everyone gets the information, and that maybe you figure out another way of assessing the students' understanding of that information, rather than just telling me what this chart means. So, I mean, what do you think about that, Rosarda, as far as weighing that pro and con between making sure someone who's using a screen reader knows what that information is, versus if the original task was to tell the instructor what the information means? What are your thoughts on that? I'm curious.
Right. So, I mean, I think, it's important for, content creators to understand, especially instructors, that it's important to provide the necessary information for their students, so that, if a student is using assistive technology, they do not miss out from the information that is displayed in that image.
Yeah.
So, just making it clear that not all images that are produced here are decorative, but there's actually, in learning, there's a lot of content that's being conveyed in other formats, but also, trying to find digital versions of content whenever possible, that, for the content to contain the necessary metadata to be read by assistive technology. So.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's the closest thing I found to a chart that's that's disseminating information. It's not super clear as to what other than how many centimeters are displaying here for each. But yeah, no, I just I agree with what Rosarda said on that. I think that you do have to weigh those pros and cons, and there are multiple ways that we can be assessing people's understanding of information, and without compromising giving that information to the people who wouldn't otherwise have it. So I think that's an important thing to remember. Let's just find my way back to this PowerPoint. Oh, is it showing notes? Yes. All right. So basic guidelines for image description, using long description for detailed infographics, charts, and visuals, alt text for simple images, making sure that you're both accurate and equitable in your descriptions, you're succinct in the descriptions, and indicating decorative images where possible, and avoiding irrelevant phrases such as picture of or image of, because the screen reader will say image of and then give your description. So you don't want the screen reader to have to say image of. It's just a redundant information that you don't need to include, just start describing. So we refer to the NCDAE cheat sheets for accessibility, and there's more information there on alt text that I will be sending you as a follow-up after the session. So I'm just going to touch on captions and transcripts because it's important to know that captions will ensure video accessibility, of course, to all viewers. And we're not just speaking about those who are having trouble hearing or deaf, but those who might be in the community and unable to play the audio because of the environment that they're in, but they want to, be reviewing your materials. And the captioning is helping them at that point understand what's going on in the video as well. Auto captioning can never be the final solution. You must edit for accuracy because none of us speak perfectly. And these systems will confuse words often. And although they're fairly accurate, is it about 85% accuracy, Rosarda, that auto captioning has, I believe? Yes. So think about, like, if your viewers aren't able to understand 15% of what it is you said in the video, would that be something you want for your audience? And so taking the time to edit captions whenever possible is important. And providing transcripts of the narration from a video is a great practice for both deaf and blind users, because I know of some people who are using screen readers who just would go to that transcript instead of even bothering opening up the video, because the visual aspect of the video isn't important to them. It's what's said in the video that's important to them. So that's something to keep in mind as well, that if you're providing a link to a video, I mean, I often will not transcribe, but write my script, my narration out, and just use that alongside whatever the video that I'm posting, so that people have options of how to navigate through my materials. Any questions on that? So these are the people that we went over yesterday in the session, but just important to remember, put faces, even though they're stock photos, to what we're asking you to do. That, you know, Carl, who is blind and uses a screen reader, was having trouble accessing a newsletter because it wasn't created accessibly. And Jaya, who is deaf and needs to watch a video to learn how to do her job, had no captioning, or the auto captioning wasn't edited actually, and there was no ASL person. And then we have our commuters who are so busy that they just have to view materials people send them while they're commuting. It's hard to hear on a train. Captioning is important for a lot of people. So it's important to keep in mind that the impact of inclusive design, you have increased engagement because learners or people in your audience differ for in how they interpret and perceive information. So designing with all people in mind makes it accessible to a greater number of people. And higher success, I think this pertains to both students, staff, and faculty, that we're all more likely to succeed and achieve goals when we feel included in the university content. And so creating an environment where all feel respected and included creates community where all are welcome. And then lastly, improved campus climate. By advocating and participating in inclusive design, we celebrate diversity, equity, and nurture a supportive campus climate. And as you know, the cost, academic and professional success, confidence, and retention. And retention applies to both work and school, so keep that in mind. If you would like to learn more, there's one more session tomorrow in the Inclusive Design series for making your course accessible. And then we have a repeat of a session we did last week for AI and accessibility, benefits and challenges. You could reach us at learningdesign@umb.edu. Book a consult with us at umb.edu/learningdesign, and then click the button for book a consult now. Or we have virtual office hours Monday through Friday in the summer from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. And we invite you to join us and ask any questions you may have.